demystifying the microbiome. You do not need a bunch of probiotics. You do not need a bunch of pre and postbiotics. You do not want to consume a ton of fiber all the time. And you definitely don't want to eat 40 different fruits and vegetables per week or eat the rainbow. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Emanuela. I'm a health and nutrition practitioner with a focus on biophysics and nature first strategies. In this video, I'm going to demystify the microbiome and piece together the information that you've been told, and that is widespread. One of the huge things that is constantly being cited is that we need to eat the rainbow. We need to eat all the different colored fruits and vegetables because of how polyphenols and those colored compounds in food assist your microbiome. What they fail to address when they teach you this is what's happening. These wonderful, kind-hearted people are going to school and learning outdated information from the schools. Even high-class schools have extremely outdated information, and they're being taught something that's incorrect. And then they're repeating it back to you because they didn't go read the papers, decipher what actually happened, and look at all the research on the microbiome. I have looked at a ton of those papers, and I can tell you that any studies or potential benefits from supplementation with anything regards to the microbiome is short-lived, and the new colony, the diversification, does not match what we've seen in hunter-gatherer tribes like the Hasda. And it doesn't match it doesn't stick around. You have to keep taking the probiotics or probiotics. You have to keep taking this stuff. When you stop taking these supplements, the new microbes, they go ciao ciao and they disappear. The best research on microbiome is on gardening projects for children, where they took them outdoors, had them play in the dirt of some kind, like playing in the dirt or gardening or whatever, and not wash their hands. They experienced a huge increase in microbiome diversity by doing that, which disappeared about 2 weeks after they stopped playing in the dirt. What does this mean? Is, like I always tell my clients, and when I used to work at a health food store, I would tell this to everyone who asked me about probiotics and microbiome, and they always looked at me like I was batshit crazy. They were like, well, how do you really improve your microbiome? And I said, well, the best way to do it would be to get outside, do some gardening, touch some dirt, and don't wash your hands, and then eat your food. And they would be like, what? I had one guy tell me, you mean you want me to go around shirtless, roll around in dirt, and that's how I'm going to prove my gut? I'm like, yeah. He was like, I'm going to get arrested, which is funny. But in all seriousness, it's actually true. The only way in which you can permanently improve your microbiome has to do with your light environment and your connection to the earth, touching, washing your hands. Washing and cleaning is the biggest destroyer of our microbiome today. We now know we have a huge microbiome on our skin. We have on our scalp. We have a unique microbiomes everywhere, in your mouth, in your vagina if you're a woman, in your crotch if you're a man, right? We have all of these different microbiomes. You have a microbiome in your colon, in your small intestine. You have all of these unique microbiomes. And yes, they do communicate with each other. They do interact with each other for sure. But we're constantly destroying this. We're like, oh, well, you got to take a shower and make sure you wash off properly with soap. I mean, your parents told you that, right? I want to take you back and imagine we're hunter-gatherers. Do you think we washed off with soap? We know that hunter-gatherers did take baths. They washed themselves, and they did use certain materials to keep themselves clean. Clean their private parts, make sure they didn't get like fecal matter in their mouth or whatever. They kept themselves clean. They just didn't use standard soap. The introduction of soap came with post-conquest type of civilization of the cultures. And of course, different cultures got civilized at different periods of time. But if you go back far enough to when we were perfectly living in tune with nature, We kept clean. We constantly bathed in natural cold running streams, lakes, whatever. But we didn't scrub microbes off of our skin. That's critical. And back to the microbiome on the inside and eating the whole, 40 different vegetables. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this information parroted by well-meaning naturopaths and nutritionists, etc., dietitians that went to school and learned outdated information where you need all of these different fibers all the time in order to feed your microbiome. Well, we know the best research on the microbiome was done on the HASDA. It was Jeff Leach. Again, there were other ones, but in studying indigenous cultures' microbiome is the most interesting because they don't take supplements and they live in tune to nature. They're barefoot, they're grounded, they're always outside, they are scantily clad with tons of skin exposed, they're not using electronics, artificial light, and they have minimal exposure to non-native EMFs. That's getting worse and worse these days, which actually has been shown in research on the HASDA that they're getting less resilient. Anyways, there was a study that Jeff Leach did where he actually gave the HASDA antibiotics. He gave them antibiotics and he was testing their stool and he was testing their microbiome. And it turned out they were able to recover in a day. They were able to recover like this. And he tried to destroy the microbiome in a variety of ways. And it didn't work. He was shocked by these results. He thought for sure if you feed them, antibiotics, they should be down for so long. Like for you and I, it takes us forever. But what he doesn't know, is that individual microbes preferentially use and emit light. And they use light, oxygen percentages, and other things to decide who should multiply. So being exposed to a high artificial blue light, for example, increases the reproduction of yeast, mold, other parasites. They prefer the blue light. There's a reason why when you deworm your animals, you're supposed to do it on the full moon. When you follow herbal deworming or natural deworming methods, because parasites are most active in the high blue of the full moon. But when you're constantly being exposed to high and blue enriched artificial light, you end up with a widespread problem of all harmful microbes. And now we sanitize everything. We sanitize our water. There's no such thing as raw water anymore. Not that you should consume dangerous microbes. Remember, there's always a key to fresh water. It's got to be moving and cold and clear. And, we had other techniques back in the day to be able to understand what water is safe and what water isn't. But we are in a sanitizing world, busy destroying our entire microbiome. And yet, somehow, for some reason, we seem to still teach our wonderful, well-meaning professionals that we need to eat the rainbow. You don't need to eat the rainbow. I'm going to dispel this one more time. There's never a point in time in the history of mankind where in a non-commercialized world, we would have access to 40 different fruits and vegetables in a single week. Never. Ever. Never going to happen. Never mind that any variety in fruits and vegetables would only be present in the summer. And the greatest variety is being found near the equator. And that's actually something they noticed with the HASDA. Even though they are at the equator, their winter microbiome is different than their summer microbiome. Their summer microbiome prefers more fibers. Their winter microbiome prefers less. And this is an equatorial indigenous people. Imagine if we had this kind of technology to study the Inuits, the indigenous tribes from way up north, back when they were still sovereign. Imagine the data we would have there from a virtually extremely low consumption of fiber and plant foods. They did consume some plant foods, 100%. But by and large, the percentage of that versus the meat and fish, it didn't even compare. Every time we look at information that's being taught to us, we have to fact check it with evolution. Evolution holds the key because nature holds the key. There was never a time in which nature's like, oops, I forgot to give you 30 different fruits and vegetables in the Arctic. Sorry. No. It's all perfectly curated for a specific reason. The other reason why you do not want to consume the rainbow, especially if it doesn't grow where you live, is because of deuterium. Deuterium is heavy hydrogen, which differs the amount of energy required to break the bonds of H2O. Your body's always busy charge separating water in order to hold and store energy and transfer information in your body by splitting water molecules. And your body's always splitting bonds. It's just part of the biochemical process. So while the chemical formula, right, will not change the way it's typically written, hydrogen is hydrogen, and it's not typically differentiated in biochemistry, in biology, and medicine. The amount of energy required to break a bond where there's high deuterium is much greater. Never mind that deuterium weighs a lot more. It disrupts a lot of other functions that rely on hydrogen, and your body relies on hydrogen a lot. And you deplete deuterium with high UV light, high quantum yield of the sun, i.e. equatorial regions. As an indigenous person, you can get too much sun in the equator if you don't eat what grows there. But nobody would have done that back in the day. And nobody typically does that now either, because those foods tend to be so palatable and fun, and because it's so driven into us that we must consume a ton of fruits and vegetables. And the reality is that you don't, unless it's summer and you live near the equator. Then please, by all means, enjoy. But if you're in Canada, if you're in the US, if it's winter where you live, if you are in Europe, wherever it is, if it's February where you are, end of February, when you're watching this, whatever, March, we're end of winter, beginning of spring, which is actually the time when there's the least amount of stuff growing. Well, typically February, January would be the least amount of stuff growing. And then things start to pop up like herbs in the area where I am, and possibly mushrooms later on in March. But these are the reasons why eating the rainbow, eating a variety of fruits and vegetables is a fallacy that we have to kill. Please kill it. Somebody tell those schools to update their information. The research is all there. You can look at the research that was done on the HAZDA. You can actually look at all the microbiome research and understand that they do it in a lab. They do it under artificial light. How many weeks did they follow it for? Did they test the microbiome after all consumption of supplements was stopped? And did they consider all these other factors? And how does the variety of the microbiome compare from that test group to the indigenous people? It doesn't. We know that it doesn't. Just go look at the data. You want to be as close as possible to the variety that you had back in the day, which means the only way to do that is to get dirty. So remember, stop washing your hands. Don't scrub everything off your skin. Stop sanitizing. Don't be afraid of dirt. Get dirty. Make yourself dirty. Spread the dirt around everywhere. And of course, run around naked. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please, if you found this content useful, like, make a comment, subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to catching you on the next one.